Welcome to Stories of Brave Mothers, a channel dedicated to telling real and touching stories of brave mothers from around the world.
What if I told you that, in the frozen heart of a Japanese village, a brave mother turned a forgotten patch of land into the salvation of an entire community? This isn't just a story about growing vegetables. It's about planting courage, love, and hope in times when blooming seemed impossible. Get ready to meet Harumi, the woman who faced the cold, hunger, and doubt to ensure no one around her would go without. In the village of Takayama, nestled among mountains that seemed to embrace its old wooden houses, lived Harumi, a brave mother of 38. She had grown up in that very place, listening to her own mother, Michiko, tell stories about how the changing seasons shaped life and the food on their table. For Harumi, the land had always smelled like home. But in recent years, things had changed, and not for the better. Japan, despite its advanced technology, was not immune to hardship. Food prices kept climbing month after month, and the small local market no longer offered the variety it once did. Harumi felt the weight of it every time she tallied expenses in the worn notebook, where she kept track of the household budget. Her husband, Kenji, worked long hours in a mechanic's shop and came home exhausted. Their 14-year-old son, Akira, was in the middle of a growth spurt and was always hungry for good. Home-cooked food. One cold February night, while washing dishes in water that was almost freezing, Harumi realized she couldn't depend solely on store-bought goods anymore. She needed to find a way to secure healthy food for the three of them, and for her elderly mother, who could no longer work. Then she remembered the small backyard behind their house, a patch of land her grandfather had cultivated when she was a child. Back then, he had harvested sweet tomatoes and crisp cucumbers. That could be the start of something. The next day, before sunrise, Harumi went outside wearing a thick coat and an old pair of gloves. She stood for a few minutes in front of the yard, now covered with dry leaves. The smell of damp earth mixed with the crisp morning air brought back a wave of memories and courage. If I can make this soil bear fruit again, no one here will go hungry, she thought. The first days were the hardest. She had to pull out old roots, clear away stones, and prepare the soil. The work was heavy, and her hands, used to household chores, quickly became covered in blisters. Michiko, even with tired legs, would sit on a small stool and offer advice. Harumi, don't forget to mix straw into the soil. It holds the moisture. Hi, Mother, Harumi would answer, feeling her back muscles burn. Akira, curious, began helping after school. He didn't know much about plants, but he loved being there, listening to his grandmother's stories about how food tasted better when grown with love. Kenji, even arriving home late, carried bags of soil and wooden planks to make small fences. Slowly, the garden stopped being just Harumi's project and became a family effort. Neighbors watched with curiosity. Some said she was wasting her time. Others, more discreetly, seemed to hope she would succeed. But Harumi wasn't discouraged. Every morning, she woke before 6, tied her hair back, and tended to the small lettuce, radish, and carrot seedlings. The silence of that hour, broken only by the distant caw of crows, was her meditation. One afternoon, while watering the soil, a chill ran down her spine as she remembered that winter wasn't over yet. A snowstorm could destroy everything. The thought made her restless. She didn't want her effort to be in vain. That's when she decided to build small makeshift greenhouses using clear plastic and bamboo that Kenji had brought from the shop's storage. They weren't perfect, but they would offer some protection. By March, the first green leaves began to appear, timid, yet full of life. Harumi knelt to look at them closely, touching each sprout gently, as if caressing a baby. In that moment, she realized the garden wasn't just about food. It was about resilience, It was about telling life that even when everything seemed difficult, there was still a way to bloom. Her mother smiled with pride. Akira took pictures of the plants to show his friends. Kenji, though tired, told his co-workers about how his wife was working miracles with a piece of land. But Harumi knew the fight was only beginning. What she didn't know yet was that soon, this garden would become not only her family's source of food, but also a refugee for neighbors who would face even harder days ahead. With spring arriving, the sweet scent of cherry blossoms drifted through the village, and Harumi's garden seemed to grow stronger, along with the nature surrounding it. The lettuce seedlings stood firm. The radishes were already forming small red bulbs beneath the soil, and the carrots showed delicate green leaves. The sight was comforting, but Harumi knew beauty didn't always mean safety. The first blow came quietly. One morning, she noticed some leaves had been gnawed, marked with uneven bites. Leaning closer, she found small snails hiding among the seedlings. In Japan, the humidity at certain times of the year was perfect for them. Harumi sighed. She knew pests could destroy weeks of work. She spent the entire morning searching for and removing each intruder by hand, while Michiko, sitting nearby, recalled an old remedy to keep them away: crushed eggshells. That cuts off their path, Harumi. They don't like stepping on anything rough, her mother explained, rubbing her cold hands to warm them. The advice worked, but the next problem didn't crawl in. It came from the sky. One day, heavy clouds formed quickly, and the rain fell hard. The wind shook the small improvised greenhouses, and Harumi ran with Akira to tighten the bamboo ties. She felt icy water running down her neck, but she couldn't stop. Kenji, warned at work, showed up drenched to help. They managed to protect most of the plants, but several rows of lettuce were ruined. The hardest part, however, wasn't the physical loss. It was the fear that all their effort could come to nothing. At night, when everyone else was asleep, Harumi would sit in the kitchen, staring through the window at the dark garden, trying to imagine how to face the next setback. It was during this time that she began receiving unexpected visits. Mrs. Ishikawa, a longtime neighbor, knocked on her door one morning, worry in her eyes. Her husband had lost his job, and their pension wasn't enough to cover expenses. Harumi offered her some fresh radishes and lettuce leaves. Ishikawa was moved, bowed deeply, and left with a shy smile. After that, other families began coming by, at first with excuses. Just wanted to see how the garden's doing, or brought some tea for Michiko, but they always left with a bag of vegetables. Harumi couldn't say no. She knew that sharing meant there might be less for her own family, but she couldn't bear the thought of someone going without. Kenji, though proud of his wife's generosity, began to worry. Harumi, if we keep this up, there won't be enough for us. Kenji, the land will give more. It always does, she replied, her voice a mix of faith and stubbornness. But increasing production meant more work and more resources. The yard was already full, so Harumi decided to grow crops in pots and repurposed containers, old tires, wooden crates, even cracked buckets. Akira helped paint and prepare each one, turning the yard into an improvised but lively mosaic. The summer heat brought new challenges. Water grew scarce, and the village faced a period of rationing. The local authorities announced that watering plants would only be allowed twice a week. Harumi felt a knot in her stomach. Without enough water, the plants could die quickly. That's when she turned to her mother's old techniques, covering the soil with straw to hold moisture, watering in the late afternoon to prevent evaporation, and reusing water from washing rice and vegetables. This discipline bore fruit, but it also took a toll. Harumi's back ached constantly. Her hands were covered in small cuts, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd slept through the night without waking to worry about the weather, the rain, or the insects. Still, each new harvest renewed her strength. One summer morning, she was awakened by hurried footsteps at the gate. It was Mr. Sato, a reserved man who almost never spoke to anyone. Nervously, he explained that his wife had fallen ill, and there was nothing fresh for her to eat at home. Harumi didn't hesitate. She picked ripe tomatoes, a few shiso leaves, and wrapped them in a clean cloth. Sato bowed deeply, and before leaving, murmured, "You have no idea how much this means." That sentence lingered in Harumi's mind. She realized the garden was no longer just a way to feed her family. It had become a point of hope for many around her, and while that filled her with pride, it also added weight to her shoulders. When autumn came, with its cool mornings and golden leaves covering the ground, Harumi looked at the garden and saw more than plants. She saw intertwined stories. Each radish, each head of lettuce, each tomato carried a piece of her family's effort and an act of kindness shared with someone in need. But deep down, she knew winter was coming, and with it, perhaps the greatest test of all. Winter arrived earlier than expected in Takayama. By November, the first snow already blanketed the rooftops, covering the narrow streets in a white mantle. The wind cut across faces like icy blades, and the silence that had once been broken by birdsong was now filled with the dry hiss of gusts. Harumi knew this season always brought challenges, but she wasn't prepared for what was coming. The small bamboo and plastic greenhouses, reinforced in the fall, still stood firm, but the bitter cold slowed plant growth. The sunlight seemed weaker, and the short days made work harder. Even so, Harumi woke before dawn, layered 3 sets of clothes, and walked through the soft snow to the garden. Opening the greenhouses, she would feel the warm, damp air escape, like a breath of life in the middle of the freezing world outside. One morning, Michiko was coughing in the kitchen, wrapped in a thick shawl. Harumi approached, worried. At 68, her mother tried to brush it off. "Just the cold. Harumi, don't worry," she said with a tired smile. But Harumi knew winter weighed heavier on those who had already lived through many seasons. The village faced a hard stretch. The main road was blocked by a heavy snowstorm, and the local market received fewer and fewer supplies. Shelves were nearly empty. Families who had once come for vegetables now appeared more often, their expressions more anxious. Harumi couldn't bring herself to turn anyone away, even knowing it meant less for her own family. One especially cold night, with the wind pounding the windows as if trying to get in, someone knocked at the door. It was Mrs. Ishikawa, the same neighbor who had asked for help months earlier, holding her 5-year-old grandson, his face pale and his hands cold. "Harumi, he hasn't eaten in a day," she said, her voice breaking. Without thinking, Harumi ran to the garden, pulled up carrots still rooted in the soil, picked frost-resistant lettuce, and gathered a handful of herbs. Back in the kitchen, she prepared a steaming soup, the aroma spreading through the air like a warm embrace. As the boy took his first spoonfuls, Ishikawa's eyes filled with tears. "You are the salvation of many here, Harumi." Those words touched her deeply but also sparked a worry. What if the garden couldn't hold out? Winter was far from over. That's when she decided to try something she vaguely remembered from her grandfather's stories: building an underground garden. With Kenji and Akira's help, she dug out part of the shed in the back, insulated the walls with wooden boards, and set up simple lamps powered by an old car battery. Kenji adapted. The space was small, but enough to grow leafy greens and sprouts that matured quickly. It became a secret refuge, where life kept growing in the very heart of winter. The news spread quietly. Harumi never advertised it, but word of mouth traveled, and soon neighbors appeared with small exchanges: tea, rice, even wool clothing. It wasn't about payment, it was about gratitude. Harumi's home became a gathering place, and the garden, above and below ground, a symbol of resilience and solidarity. One day, a storm fiercer than any before struck the village. The winds tore part of the roof from one of the greenhouses. Harumi ran there with Akira, facing snow that stung their skin like needles. As they tried to cover the damage with tarps, Akira shouted, "Mom, look!" He pointed to the ground, where, even under the snow, small green leaves were holding on. In that moment, Harumi felt something beyond words. Life always found a way. Even on the harshest days, there was always a hidden sprout, ready to emerge. When spring finally arrived, the village was different, not just because of the changing seasons, but because a renewed spirit had taken root among its people. Many began planting small gardens, inspired by Harumi's example. The market shelves filled up again, but full dependence on them was gone. The community was closer, more aware. Standing in the yard, Harumi watched her mother Michiko gathering herbs, Akira carrying baskets, and Kenji smiling at the sight of everything in bloom. She knew that somehow, this garden had nourished more than stomachs. It had nourished hope. And deep down, she understood that the truest harvest wasn't just in the soil, but in the bonds and care that had grown among everyone during that relentless winter. If this story touched your heart, imagine how many other brave mothers around the world are turning challenges into hope. Here on this channel, we believe every act of love deserves to be told and remembered. So subscribe, like, and share so more people can hear stories like Harumi's. And together, we can keep cultivating a world with more empathy, courage, and human warmth.